Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, an olive branch to Iran. President Trump urging Iran and Israel to make peace as he says Iran telegraphed its strikes on a U.S. base beforehand. What could come next between the U.S. and Iran? Iris Tao is in the studio to bring us the latest updates. No injuries were reported after Iran's attack on that U.S. airbase in Qatar. And on the same day, Iran launched another barrage of missiles at Israel. Jason Perry reports. As the fighting intensifies, international leaders are weighing in. Arian Pazdar has what NATO says about the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. A powerful summer heat wave is scorching nearly half the country, putting millions under heat alerts. Christina Corona tells us where records could break and just how hot it's expected to get.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump says Iran gave the U.S. advance notice before launching a missile attack on an American base in Qatar. The White House now calling for peace and de-escalation as it downplays an earlier suggestion for potential regime change in Iran. Joining us now live in studios, NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Great to have you here in person. But first, what is the latest response from the president after these Iranian strikes?
Sure. So President Trump this afternoon extended an olive branch of peace to Iran after Iran today launched a missile attack on American base in Qatar, of course, in retaliation to U.S. strikes over the weekend on 3 critical nuclear sites in Iran. President Trump says that because Iran gave the U.S. early notice, there were no injuries to American service members and no casualties either. He further signaled a further de-escalation by saying that Iran have gotten it, quote, all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. And he would like Tehran to, quote, proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and he's going to encourage Israel to do the same. And his last post on Truth Social before we just went on air says that, quote, congratulations world, it's time for peace. Of course, Trump's message also comes as Israel, despite launching strikes back on Iran today, saying over the weekend that it too does not want to be dragged into a war with Iran and is very, very close already to completing its military goals in Iran. And of course, while it remains to be seen if Israel and Iran can actually de-escalate as Trump is urging, it looks a lot like actually the situation back in 2020 when President Trump back then also ordered the assassination of a top Iranian general, Soleimani. Back then, remember, Iran also responded by launching missile attacks on American bases and back then in Iraq, but it also gave the U.S. advance notice, and therefore resulting in no casualties in that attack.
And Iris, the president on Sunday floated the idea of regime change in Iran if the current leaders can't make Iran great again. Now, what is the White House saying about that as it's now signaling for de-escalation between the U.S. and Iran?
Sure. There was a lot of speculation after Trump put out that MAGA or Make Iran Great Again message, questioning, quote, actually, why wouldn't there be a regime change in Iran? Of course, Trump has been complaining for weeks and months about Iran slow-walking nuclear negotiations with the U.S. before actually launching those strikes on its nuclear sites this past weekend. But today, this morning, when asked about it, the White House press secretary seemed to downplay it, saying that Trump is just raising a question. Watch.
The president's posture and our military posture has not changed. The president was just simply raising a question that I think many people around the world are asking. If they refuse to engage in diplomacy moving forward, why shouldn't the Iranian people rise up against this brutal terrorist regime?
And in potential another sign for speculation for de-escalation today, oil prices actually fell and stock prices climbed despite the latest Iranian attack on U.S. base today in Qatar. And President Trump on Truth Social earlier today wrote, quote, everyone keep oil prices down. I'm watching. So, of course, a lot to be seen in the coming days when it comes to the oil prices globally, as well as any new signs of de-escalation or escalation between Israel, Iran, and potentially the U.S.
Lots at stake for sure, Iris. As always, thanks for those updates.
Of course.
And as Iris mentioned, no injuries were reported after Iran launched missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar. The base had been evacuated prior to the attack. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Iranian officials have been threatening to launch attacks on U.S. bases if Iran is attacked. And on Monday, Iran said they launched an attack on Al Udeid U.S. airbase in Qatar. Explosions were heard as projectiles streamed across the skies of Qatar's capital of Doha. However, Qatar's Ministry of Defense in a post on X said they had successfully intercepted a missile attack targeting Al Udeid Air Base. And the spokesperson for Qatar's foreign ministry said that no casualties resulted from the attack, as the base had been evacuated before the strike. And he also said that Qatar reserves the right to respond directly to the attack in line with international law. Qatar had also temporarily closed its airspace prior to the attack, and the U.S. Embassy in Qatar had advised Americans to shelter in place out of what it said was, quote, an abundance of caution. Iran also launched another barrage of missiles at Israel on Monday. Sirens sounded as residents were seen taking cover in the city of Haifa. A local jewelry shop owner shared his thoughts afterward.
We were out by a miracle. It could have been much worse. The damages right now are only glass damage and so on. We are healthy in spirit. We will make an effort to hold on.
The Israel Defense Forces spokesperson said they had identified several impacts in Israel with no casualties, and he explained how they were trying to prevent such attacks from Iran.
Every base where launches were detected since the beginning of the operation has been struck and damaged.
Israel also reported striking 6 airports in Iran and also the headquarters of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi went to Russia on Monday, and he said that consultations between Iran and Russia have always existed.
Given the current special circumstances in the region, it is only natural that our consultations are now more precise, more serious, and closer.
In a related development, President Trump asked on Truth Social, where the former Russian president Dmitry Medvedev said that, quote, he and other countries would supply nuclear warheads to Iran. And if so, Trump continued to let him know immediately. Trump then went on to say that America's nuclear submarines are, quote, the most powerful and lethal weapons ever built. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz in the past, but has never followed through. Closing the strait would restrict trade and impact global oil prices. Here's more about the strait and why it's important.
The strait lies between Iran and Oman. It's 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, with the shipping lane just 2 miles wide. About a fifth of the world's total oil consumption passes through the strait. Over the past 3 years, an estimated 17 to 20.8 million barrels of crude have passed through daily. OPEC members and Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, Kuwait and Iraq export most of their crude via the strait, mainly to Asia. Qatar, among one of the world's biggest liquefied natural gas exporters, sends almost all of its LNG through the strait. There have been scores of incidents over the years. In 1973, Arab producers led by Saudi Arabia slapped an oil embargo on Western supporters of Israel in its war with Egypt. During the 1980 to 1988 Iran-Iraq war, the two sides sought to disrupt each other's exports. And in 1988, a US warship shot down an Iranian airliner, killing all 290 on board. Washington said it was an accident. Tehran insisted it was a deliberate attack. In 2012, Iran threatened to block the strait in retaliation for US and European sanctions. And in May 2019, 4 vessels, including 2 Saudi oil tankers, were attacked off the UAE coast outside the strait. June Go, senior oil market analyst at Sparta Commodities, said there would be many implications for Iran if they chose to close the strait.
They depend on it for their own livelihood, for their own provisions, and also for the export of their oil. So it is akin to shooting themselves on the foot.
Despite this, fears of a closure are sparking price hike expectations and already have shippers on edge.
On Capitol Hill, Democratic senators push to limit President Trump's war powers as Iran responds to the strike on its nuclear facilities. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more on this story.
We expect them to explain to the American people the basis of the strike. What were the results in terms of actually thwarting Iran's capacity to become a nuclear power.
And I have filed a resolution that I think will get a vote later this week. Members of the Senate have to declare whether or not the U.S. should be at war with Iran.
As Democratic lawmakers push for a vote on their War Powers Act resolution to limit the authority of President Trump, Iranian missiles targeted a U.S. base in Qatar. The U.S. has approximately 10,000 troops in Qatar, mainly in the Al Udeid Air Base, which serves as forward headquarters of Central Command. Qatar's defense ministry said it intercepted all missiles, and the Pentagon reported that no damage or deaths have been reported. Satellite imagery from last week revealed that U.S. military assets at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar had been moved, including over 40 visible U.S. aircraft to shield them from Iranian retaliation.
We have troops in the region. Iran has targeted Americans around the world in Marine barracks in Beirut, in barracks in Saudi Arabia. They've targeted embassies of countries around the world.
I don't think this is an appropriate time for a war powers resolution, and I don't think it's necessary. Listen, for 80 years, presidents of both parties have acted with the same commander-in-chief authority under Article 2. It's all politics. This is not a time for politics.
Republican senators have rejected the notion that Trump's actions in Iran were unconstitutional and have celebrated how they are impacting U.S. foreign policy priorities.
So what's the big picture? Saudi-Israel is more likely than ever. The Arabs are very impressed. I think we're going to see real change in the Mideast. The weaker Iran, the stronger the likelihood of peace. The Saudi-Arab-Israel deal, I think, is back on track.
It's important to note that despite Democratic lawmakers' push to restrict the president's war powers, the decision by the commander-in-chief has ample precedent. Like in 2021, President Joe Biden launched strikes against Iranian-backed militia groups in Iraq and Syria. And in 2011, President Obama launched strikes in Libya during the Libyan civil war, both without congressional approval. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Reuters' Tom Homan says he's concerned over the number of known Iranian nationals and other, quote, gotaways who were released into the country after entering illegally. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
As tensions rise between the U.S. and Iran, White House border czar Tom Homan tells Fox News that his biggest concern since day one has been the 2 million illegal immigrants who got away while crossing the border during the previous administration, including 1,200 Iranian nationals.
Over 2 million people crossed that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from, because they got away because Border Patrol is so overwhelmed.
Homan's comments come after U.S. officials issued warnings about the danger of terror-backed sleeper cells in the country. This is following U.S. strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. Due to national security concerns, Iranians are considered, quote, special interest aliens. The Department of Homeland Security is supposed to implement enhanced vetting. On Sunday, the State Department raised warning levels for Americans who are traveling to countries in the Middle East. The most severe warning is for Lebanon. The State Department ordered the evacuation of family members and non-emergency government personnel from the country.
We're ready to negotiate this in a peaceful, diplomatic way. We've been prepared to do that for days. They are the ones that played games, as they have done for 40 years, as they have done to multiple presidents.
Also, following the strikes, the Department of Homeland Security released a memo cautioning of a, quote, heightened threat environment in the U.S. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
International reactions continue to come in after the U.S. carried out strikes on Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend. European allies suggest they're in support of the attacks. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has what international leaders are saying.
Would not agree that this is against international law what the U.S. did.
NATO chief Mark Rutte on Monday, siding with the U.S. He says U.S. strikes on Iran over the weekend did not violate international law.
Let's focus on the essentials here. My biggest fear would be for Iran to own and be able to use and deploy a nuclear weapon.
Germany's chancellor echoes the sentiment, saying evidence shows Iran was aiming to obtain nuclear weapons.
Nobody in this world needs 60% or even higher enriched uranium for a nuclear power plant. Nobody. You can get by with much, much lower enrichment percentages.
He also pointed out the fact that Iran's supposedly peaceful facilities are hidden under mountains. The Israeli military, meanwhile, continuing strikes on Iran on Monday.
We continue to damage and deny the Iranian regime's ability to launch and produce missiles. At this moment, the Air Force planes are deepening the strikes in the Tehran area. with an emphasis on commanding headquarters of the Revolutionary Guards.
He added that Israel is in close coordination with the US. Iran's foreign ministry, meanwhile, denies accusations of seeking nuclear weapons.
When someone accuses Iran of seeking weapons of mass destruction or pursuing nuclear weapons, it's an extremely serious accusation.
Iran's foreign minister is in Moscow on Monday. According to Reuters, the leader of Iran's regime sent a letter to Putin seeking more help from Russia. Arian Pastor, NTD News.
The exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, is calling for Iran's supreme leader to resign in favor of a peaceful transition. He offered to lead the country once the mullah's regime is gone. NTD's international correspondent David Vives attended Prince Reza's press conference in Paris.
What is next for Iran? Prince Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah who fled the country in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution, addressed this question today in Paris at a venue near France's parliament. The prince is viewed by many as a neutral political figure and maybe the most viable alternative to the current regime. Prince Reza Pahlavi stated that, according to information he relies on, the head of Iran's regime is currently preparing to flee the country. He urged Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei to step down.
I have a direct message for Ali Khamenei. Step down. And if you do, you will receive a fair trial and due process of law, which is more than you have ever given any Iranian. To other senior regime officials, those of you whose hands are soiled with the blood of the Iranian people, you too will have to face justice.
Pahlavi further offered himself to lead the transition if the Islamic Republic were to collapse. He presented a cooperation plan to coordinate with all forces inside and outside the country, including a series of measures to fix the country's economy for the coming years and re-establishment of new relationships with the United States and Europe.
I'm stepping in to lead this transition. I don't believe I need a title to play that role. The important thing is to be someone who can galvanize the nation, unite as much as possible the majority of democratically minded secular forces within the opposition and the political spectrum, as I mentioned. But most importantly, how can we, post-collapse, step into that phase of transition, working together, of course, with many elements who are in Iran today, who will be joining us in that effort to make sure that we can stabilize the transition phase.
Prince Reza Pahlavi did not specify what he expects regarding a potential U.S. intervention or support for a regime change. He only expressed hopes that Western governments do not give the regime another lifeline or opportunity to persist, warning that the nuclear threat remains active as long as the regime is in place. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, Attorney General Pam Bondi proposes a $34 billion budget for the Justice Department. She tells Congress the funds will help law enforcement keep Americans safe. Arlene Richards reports. Summer's just getting started, but in some parts of the country, temperatures are already turning brutal. We'll show you where things are heating up and how people are keeping cool. A professor warns that gas could reach $8 a gallon in California, saying this could happen next year with plans to shut down 2 oil refineries. David Lamb hears from some locals when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Trump administration can now resume deporting criminal illegal immigrants to countries other than their homelands. This comes after the Supreme Court today delivered another victory to the president. In a 6-3 ruling, the justices reversed a lower court's decision blocking the administration from conducting such removals. The case was brought by a group of illegal immigrants who were sent on a deportation flight to South Sudan. All of them came from different countries and were reportedly convicted of serious crimes. A federal judge last month imposed a blockade on the removal, demanding the Trump administration provide due process and advance notice before taking actions. But the administration says its policy already complies with due process requirements. Attorney General Pam Bondi today told the House Appropriations Committee her department needs a $34 billion budget for fiscal year 2026. She said it's to help law enforcement tackle serious crime at home and on the border. Here are some of the highlights.
Attorney General Pam Bondi presented the Trump administration's fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Justice.
President Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposal totals $34 billion for the Department of Justice. That money will support federal law enforcement as well as our state, local, and tribal law enforcement partners. My primary objective as Attorney General is to return the department to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously enforcing the law.
Bondi said in a statement that President Trump's budget includes $18.3 billion to law enforcement components and the U.S. attorney's offices. The funds will enable the department to continue to target the most violent offenders domestically and abroad. Another $2.8 billion would support U.S. attorneys in their investigations of serious immigration-related crimes domestically and at the border. Other allocations could support dangerous drug seizures, criminal justice reform, and reducing department inefficiencies. Representative Rosa DeLauro had a fiery exchange with Bondi over her concern that the proposal cut fundings for gun control enforcement.
You are proposing a 26% cut to ATF for fiscal year 2026, as well as a 4.4% cut to DEA. So you're going to merge the two agencies together, and then you're going to shortchange their resources, so neither one of them will be able to do the job that they have been designed to do.
As I was attempting to answer your question very calmly, unlike you,
excuse me, Madam Attorney General. Answer yes or no. Tell me what the numbers are. I don't want to hear all of your filibuster about this. Go ahead, please. Tell us the numbers.
Bondi later said that the drugs and the guns go together so that the ATF and DEA will be working hand in hand, and that this will eliminate the bureaucracy at the top. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A dangerous heat wave is gripping parts of the U.S., bringing the hottest temperatures of the year and record-breaking heat for many cities. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
A rare and dangerous June heat wave is blazing across much of the country, putting nearly 150 million people from Texas to Maine under heat alerts Monday. Nearly 50 cities, including New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., are at risk of breaking daily high temperature records this week. New York City may break its daily high temperature records on both Monday and Tuesday, with temperatures climbing into the mid to upper 90s. Mayor Eric Adams shared a video on X warning residents to be cautious.
Summer's here, and so is our first heat wave of the year. And this extreme heat will not just be uncomfortable, it's going to be brutal and dangerous if you do not treat it with the understanding that we want you to. We expect to see temperature in the high 90s. We expect to hit peak heat on Tuesday, with a temperature possibly reaching 100 degrees.
New York City hasn't seen temperatures reach 100 degrees in June since 1966. Many New York residents and visitors share how they will keep cool.
I'm trying to stay inside as much as I can just because I'm dripping in sweat. So.
I came here from the UK, so I'm not used to this heating, but I'm quite enjoying it so far. Yeah, we're going to go and check out Central Park today, so hopefully maybe it cools down a little bit. I think we're going to check out the zoo as well.
I'm a bit concerned about the heat. It's quite hot, but yeah, it feels we have to drink a lot of water and we'll still continue playing.
Overnight lows will stay unusually warm, offering little relief from the stifling conditions. Philadelphia is forecast to reach 101 degrees Tuesday, possibly breaking 3 daily records in a row. From Chicago to Boston, heat index values could soar between 100 and 110 degrees. Washington, D.C. is bracing for 3 straight triple-digit days, peaking near 100 through midweek. The National Weather Service calls this a level 4 extreme heat risk, with humidity making it feel even hotter. Officials in states like Nebraska, South Dakota, Colorado, and Iowa have shared images of roads buckling under the extreme heat. Relief is expected Wednesday in the Midwest and Thursday in the Northeast as the heat dome starts to weaken. Officials urge residents to take precautions as the hottest days of summer may still lie ahead. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, President Trump announcing on Truth Social moments ago that Israel and Iran have agreed to a ceasefire. Foreign policy and national security analyst Armin Kurdian joins us to discuss the latest developments. And are everyday Americans on board with President Trump's strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities? We'll hear from folks in D.C. when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump posting on Truth Social moments ago that a ceasefire has been agreed between Israel and Iran. The announcement comes hours after Iran launched multiple missiles at a U.S. airbase in Qatar. Qatar's defense ministry said it successfully intercepted the attack. Joining us now to discuss these developments is Armin Kurdian. He's a foreign policy and national security analyst and a retired U.S. Navy captain. Armin, thank you so much for joining us. A lot of developments here. President Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "There will be a complete and total ceasefire for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended." He added that this is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. First, what's your reaction to this announcement?
Good afternoon, Tiffany. Well, I'm maybe a little surprised it came as early as it did, but perhaps the U.S. strike over the weekend accelerated Iran's calculus. They are in many ways an irrational regime in terms of their behavior. However, they may have looked at this simply from the standpoint, understanding that they were not able to defend themselves against Israel, against the United States, and the fact that slowly what they might have in terms of collateral if they wanted to trade or use as a bargaining chip or some kind of a negotiated settlement, that their assets were slowly getting attrited and diminished, and they had to basically do something. I fully believe that it was taken as an exceptionally bitter pill to swallow for Iran, considering all their bluster over the last few decades. I don't know that this is the end to hostility overall, but at least in the short term, it looks like the shooting will be stopping.
And Armin, Qatar has condemned Iran's attack earlier today, calling it a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty and airspace. What do you make of Qatar's response so far?
It makes perfect sense. I'd say the same thing. The missiles were lobbed at a U.S. airbase that happened to be inside Qatar. So in the true sense of the word, Iran was shooting missiles into Qatar. So I'd be pretty upset if I was Qatar as well. You got several countries there nearby. You've got Bahrain, which is just across the water, very close. Kuwait is just a little bit to the north. Saudi Arabia. You have Oman as well. So a lot of these Gulf nations that were potentially in Iran's path, it's possible that there were some back channels to Iran's government as well, saying you guys need to stop fighting. This is not good for you. It's not good for the Middle East. So I would venture to guess there was some of that going on besides simply the overt types of overtures that we were seeing in the media. Ultimately, I think while a lot of negotiation will happen on the outside between U.S. and Iran, and perhaps between Israel and Iran through intermediaries, it'll be interesting to see if Israel and Iran actually meet face to face. That would be a historic first. Just even the fact that they might be in the same room could be a very positive step.
And digging into that, actually, President Trump has made it a goal to normalize relations between Israel and Middle East nations. We saw that through the Abraham Accords in his first term. How does Iran fit into this? Will its future impact Trump's objective here?
Iran is finding itself very, very isolated since the government in Syria has collapsed, since a lot of their proxies were diminished, and now that its nuclear capabilities are gone, Hamas and Hezbollah have been badly damaged and mauled. So their ability to affect things surrounding the Middle East has been severely diminished. Initially, the strike on Israel by Hamas really did serve Iran's purpose because it put an end to what was possibly going to be rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Israel and perhaps some other countries. That was put on hold. But now they are in a much weaker position. So I would be very surprised if there were not additional agreements, countries joining the Abraham Accords. Let's remember that Syria and Israel never actually formally signed any kind of peace agreement or deal besides a mere ceasefire following the 1967 and 73 wars. An agreement between them could be seen historic on the level of what we saw between Israel and Egypt in 1978. I think we can all hope for such kinds of deals because ultimately more peace in the Middle East, who knows? We might be seeing a dawn of a new age.
And zooming out a bit here, Russia, China, and Pakistan issued statements condemning the U.S. strikes. But what are you anticipating to see from those countries in terms of potentially helping Iran?
Well, China didn't want to see the Straits of Hormuz closed. That would have been very, very negatively impactful for them. Russia is a little bit hypocritical, saying, this unprovoked attack against Iran while they're trying to steal an entire country. So I don't think anybody's really taking them seriously. Pakistan hasn't necessarily been a reliable U.S. ally, to say the least. So they can condemn all they want. A lot of that is for their public consumption. We're not necessarily going to pay very close attention to it or respond to it, other than I think the picture Trump is trying to paint right now in terms of genuinely wanting to bring peace in the Middle East and not continue the fighting and shooting, no more endless wars, and no more conflict between the U.S. and Israel and Iran, which only serves to kill more people. Ultimately, the regime in Iran is going to have to change. It's going to have to be done internally. The United States cannot be seen to affect the internal workings of Iran. There were still a lot of hard feelings when the CIA allegedly helped overturn Mossadegh, who was a communist sympathizer, but at the same time, a lot of Iranians felt great umbrage to that. And that was part of the reason why you saw the Shah get overturned in 1978. But that government needs to go before we can really, truly see better times in the Middle East long term going forward. But at least maybe in the short term, we can isolate them.
And expanding on that in terms of future negotiations between either Israel, Iran, and or the U.S., what does Israel ultimately want here?
Israel just wants peace. They want secure borders. They want not to be attacked. They want to live their lives peacefully. I don't think they want to occupy Gaza. I don't think they want to occupy the West Bank. I think they want to see those areas demilitarized with no weapons, and perhaps if there's foreign direct investment coming from outside, to leverage and exploit those areas, make it another Beirut of the Middle East, the way Beirut originally was before all of the ruckus that was happening to Israel's neighbor to the north. Economic development, free markets, capital investments, those are the truest ways towards peace. The Middle Eastern countries, they're not going to turn into democracies or constitutional republics or free market societies necessarily overnight. But at the same time, very slow, gradual movement in that direction, I think could be very helpful. At the very least, you see a lot of countries like, Bahrain, the UAE, and other parts of the Middle East have seen the benefits of free markets. And, Dubai is a kind of a Middle Eastern paradise, if you will. So if other countries, other parts of the, other Arab nations, other members of the Arab League want to emulate that, then perhaps those free markets and that kind of expansion of human capital will actually serve their interests and serve the rest of the world as well.
Well, big developments for sure, Armin Kurdi, and as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tiffany.
President Trump hinting at a regime change in Iran if the current regime is, quote, unable to make Iran great again. What does Trump mean, and what powers does the Constitution give him to authorize strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? Tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for NTD's Capitol Report. You'll hear analysis from Alexander Gray, who was Chief of Staff of the White House National Security Council during the first Trump administration. And how are everyday folks reacting to President Trump's decision to strike Iran's nuclear sites? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
What are you guys' thoughts on President Trump's decision to strike Iran's nuclear sites? Do you think it was justified?
I think it was justified. I think it's time that there's not just one country in the world that is doing all the dirty work for everybody else in democracy and to be safe.
It's also time to take on the bully. I mean, bullies at school, guess what happens to them?
Well, I guess they've been bad for so many years. It's time to do something, I guess.
Iran, they ain't good people. They're not good people. However, they haven't shot a nuclear device off. My thought was if they did it, then pound them.
I think stopping them from developing a nuclear weapon is a really good idea. I'm a believer that if they had one, they're crazy enough that they would try to attack the U.S.
I have concerns about a nuclear-armed Iran, but I think that the lack of consultation with Congress and it seemed like a hasty decision. President Trump has talked a little bit about a possible regime change in Iran. What do you make of that?
I think that's a wishful thinking on his part.
I don't think that's something that we should be trying to influence at this time. I mean, that would be something for the nation of Iran to decide if they want.
I would imagine that freedom would be a nice choice.
would be the best thing for the Iranian people. Most Iranian people don't want this regime, it seems. And I'm sure that there's a lot of the Arab Gulf states and countries that are very happy about this. And hopefully terrorism will start being reduced, both abroad and in America.
Do you think President Trump's decision to strike Iran will make America a safer place in the future?
I can only hope.
Because we don't know how many terrorists are hanging around D.C., Los Angeles, New York, everywhere.
Right now, I don't know what's going to happen. I figure they got some sleepers over here in America, and they have to wait and see what they do.
It's a temporary success, and it's a temporary safety net, but long-term wise, I think it was a real bad decision.
Perhaps that this is showing the world that we are the superpower, and sometimes we have to, make hard decisions like that.
A professor warns that gas prices in California could hit as much as $8 a gallon. He says the planned shutdown of 2 oil refineries would be the cause. NTD's David Lamb reports.
A professor warns that gas prices could potentially reach between $7.30 and $8.40 per gallon in California. A recent report by University of Southern California professor Michael Miche says prices could reach that level by the end of 2026 if 2 refineries shut down. Last October, Phillips 66 announced plans to shut down its refinery in the Los Angeles area in late 2025. Similarly, in April this year, Valero said it intends to idle, restructure, or cease refining operations at a refinery in Benicia by April 2026. Nearly 300,000 barrels per day, about 20% of the state's usage, would be eliminated.
All the time is like the price of gasoline is prices all the time is like hiding, but people still survive.
Valero says it's due to years of regulatory pressure and significant fines for air quality violations, including an $82 million penalty in 2024. Phillips 66 cited similar challenges. Lawmaker Mike Gibson believes California should do what it can to ensure that other refineries remain in the state. He said, "They have said that they cannot do business in the state of California. The regulatory agencies have imposed on the refiners of California very stringent regulation that makes it very difficult for them to remain in the state of California."
One party, multiple parties, I don't know. Whoever isn't willing to budge. But as citizens, we are feeling the pitfalls of their infighting. Figure it out so that we can feel some relief.
Both Valero and Phillips 66 said they will work with employees and the community to provide help and support during the transition period. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Coming up in the NBA, yesterday's Game 7 saw the Thunder emerge as champions while the Pacers deal with heartache. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, especially the Heat. But first, Oklahoma City won the NBA title last night, beating Indiana in Game 7. But the game was marred a bit by the injury of Tyrese Halliburton. What did you make of it?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to mention the Thunder winning without mentioning the injury to Tyrese Halliburton. I mean, it was really the most memorable play of the game. Now, he had been listed as questionable with that right calf injury for Game 7, just as he was for Game 6, but just as he did for Game 6, he started anyway. I got up to a great start, hit 3 out of 4 from three-point land in just 7 minutes. But then midway through the first quarter, all of a sudden he fell down, was clearly in a lot of pain, had to be helped off the court. Did not return. Now the team just moments ago actually announced that he did have a torn Achilles, which is really devastating news. I mean, they did not announce a timeline. Usually the timeline for that is around a year, but we'll have to actually see. Now when he left, it was tied at 16. Pacers actually hung tough that first half, led by a point at halftime, but really the Thunder regrouped in the second half. They got their pressure defense going, really overwhelmed Indiana to win the game. Let's actually listen to what was said after the game here.
I mean, I think it was great for the league and the product for 2 small market teams that have never won a championship to to have the type of series that we did. It was hard to appreciate that because it was just so hard in the moment. But one thing I learned is, you don't really. It's hard to get to your ceiling as a team in the playoffs when you're playing great teams over and over again. It's really about how high your floor is. And I thought was the mark of our team. I mean, you have to really grind it out, and it's an endurance race. And you have to be able to win in the mud. You have to be able to win ugly. You have to be able to gut it out. And that's what we did. The team did an unbelievable job of that.
It was a tough feeling to see your franchise guy go down like that. But to have to move on and kind of compartmentalize it is tough. I thought we were fine. We I don't even remember the score going into halftime, but we were up 1. So, I thought we did a good job of kind of compartmentalizing it. Obviously, we missed him, but we all are devastated for him, and obviously support him.
Yeah, I thought Coach Mark Daigneault kind of nailed it there when he said, "Got to win ugly." It wasn't the prettiest win at all yesterday. That's kind of what the Thunder do. They kind of muddy up the game. So congratulations to them, NBA champions.
Oh, for Oklahoma City, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was named Finals MVP after scoring 29 points. Now, it was his arrival in a trade 6 years ago that kind of started the Thunder's rebuild.
Yeah, exactly. That trade for Paul George, where the Thunder trade George to the Clippers for SGA plus 5 future first-round picks and then 2 future pick swaps, right to swap picks in the first round if the other team's is better. A week later, they traded their other superstar, Russell Westbrook, to Houston, got 2 more first-round picks plus 2 more pick swaps. And those 2 trades really laid the foundation for this team. Obviously, they got SGA, who's the MVP of the league, out of that deal. Plus, they ended up, one of those picks they used for Jalen Williams, who's now a 2-time All-Star, another very good young player. But really, all those picks haven't actually all been conveyed yet, but a number of them they've used to build this team, and they've still got several more left. In fact, this team, they've got 2 more picks in this first round coming up. I don't even know if they have room for them on the current roster. That's so different from most teams who end up mortgaging the future for a chance to win a title. They've actually done it in the opposite way. They are very well set up for the future. It's the second youngest team to win an NBA title. So really an incredible job by the Thunder. This is possibly a dynasty in the making. We'll have to see.
Big stakes right there. Well, as we look to next season, which teams beside the Thunder look like title contenders?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to pick Indiana here, even though I picked against them all 4 rounds of this playoffs and was wrong 3 of the times. Next year, they will. It looks like we're not sure what they're going to get out of Tyrese Halliburton. And you could say ditto for the Boston Celtics with that injury to Jason Tatum, who also has suffered torn Achilles. I would say Houston now with that reported trade for Kevin Durant, they might be favorites to be able to at least give Oklahoma City trouble in the Western Conference there. Plus Golden State, they were very good after they got Jimmy Butler there. Him, Steph Curry, Steve Kerr, Draymond Green could make a good team there. You also have the Cleveland Cavs, best record in the East. They had those injury problems against Indiana. And you've got those teams that have a couple of superstars that just need more surrounding them, like the Lakers, with LeBron James, Luka Doncic, plus Denver with Nikola Jokic there. And finally, Giannis Antetokounmpo. We're not sure if he could be heading somewhere this summer, but if he does, whatever team gets him will certainly be a contender for an NBA title. And then finally, the New York Knicks. I'm not sure where to place the New York Knicks after they let go of Tom Thibodeau, their head coach. I really thought a lot of them, but they had a 51-win team last year with him as head coach. Maybe they're still in the mix depending on who they get as coach there. So those are my early picks for next season. I do reserve the right to change them depending on how the summer goes. So just so you know, Tiff, all right?
And New York, of course, will be watching closely for the Knicks.
For sure, for sure.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.